the sanctions. If the intention was to make life a lot more difficult for the poorest and most vulnerable in society, then I think, yes, they have been quite successful on that front, because the price rises obviously are going to be quite damaging to people on low incomes. What about the wealthy people, the people in power or the people with money? Well, I think it's ridiculous to think that the sanctions should have any real impact on them. Sure, the value of their holdings and might have decreased quite significantly, but if you've got, say, $200 million worth of rubles, and now because of the sanction you've only got $100 million, well then, I mean, that's not the end of the world, is it? I mean, there's worse things than having the $100 million. I mean, do you really think that the personal chef of the president has to say, "I'm terribly sorry, sir, but I'm afraid we were not able to procure the fillet steak for tonight's meal. Will the offcuts suffice?" Well, no, of course not. I mean, it's just absolutely ridiculous, isn't it? The sanctions haven't made any difference at all to powerful people, wealthy people. On the contrary, it's actually helped them in many ways, because they're the only people that can afford to buy all the new businesses that have cropped up since the sanctions, to replace all the businesses that left. So actually, the wealthier people are just getting wealthier. As is often the way in any kind of crisis or a war, as always, interest rates have risen. So again, for the poor people who are likely to borrow money, that's bad news. But for the wealthy people, or the people with savings, well then, that's great. They're now getting 15, 16%. Sure, they can't now go on holiday to America or to the EU, but no big deal, they just go to Dubai instead. Now, has Russia changed since the sanctions? Has it changed Russia? I think actually it probably has. However, I wouldn't say it's changed Russia for the worst. I'd even suggest it's perhaps even changed Russia for the better. For example, all the symbols of Western civilization, the social media sites and the fast food outlets, they've all disappeared, as well as so many other companies. And really, I think that's a good thing. If my daughter can grow up in a world without TikTok or junk food, I'm totally cool with that. As for any desirable Western product that used to be here, all that's happened is that it's been replaced by a Russian product, which is exactly the same in most cases. So for those that still want to get hold of it, you still can. If you still want specifically the Western thing, no problem, you can still get it. You just have to go through a third country, so get it imported via Kazakhstan or Armenia, for example. In other words, all the Western companies that were here before, they're effectively still here, but they're no longer Western companies. They've become Russian companies. They've been bought up by Russians, which means all the billions of dollars per year that used to leave Russia to go to Western companies now stays in the country. So if you can read Russian, you'll see that bus stop is named after the first man in space, Yuri Gagarin. And rather curiously, it's decorated with a Christmas tree, or rather a New Year tree. And for good measure, good old-fashioned Hroshevka in the background. Actually, I can see just ahead of me there's a food place. It's called, well, in English, something like Tasty and Full Stop. I'll go in there for a coffee, and you have to work out which well-known international brand it is very, very similar to. So here it is on the outside. Does it ring any bells? This Russian company even offers a drive-through. So this is your final clue. So I'm pretty sure you got that I'm referring to McDonald's, of course. If you didn't get that, well then, serious respect to you for having never been in a McDonald's in your entire life. Basically, it's exactly the same. There's only two differences. Firstly, it's no longer called McDonald's, it's called something else. And secondly, it's no longer owned by an American company, it's now owned by a Russian company. So it's a Russian company making the profit, not an American company. Let's get back into the topic in hand, shall we? And the sanctions. Now, if a dunce like me knows that they're not doing much good, then surely the Western powers that be also know it. And I guess they do know it really, but I guess they've got to be seen to be doing something. I mean, what else can you realistically do? I mean, you've only got to look at countries like Iran and North Korea, who've had Western sanctions against them for years, if not decades. And it's not made the slightest bit of difference. If anything, the sanctions help strengthen their position, because it creates a siege mentality. They can influence the masses by saying that, the other countries are ganging up on them and they have to stick together, and it works. The propaganda is very successful. In the case of North Korea, the Americans, they could invade quite easily if they wanted to, or any other Western alliance. But really, there's nothing to be gained by doing that, is there? Nothing to be gained at all, so what's the point? Now, Russia is slightly different. The Western powers that be would absolutely love to invade Russia if they could and get their hands on all the resources that they need and want. But they can't do that because Russia can defend itself with the atomic bomb. And that's effectively the crux of it. There's a supermarket there. Why don't we go in there and have a look at some of the products. We've got Coca-Cola, we've got Lubimi Cola, we've got, oh my goodness, loads. Classical Cola, Dobry Cola. Basically, it's all the Coca-Cola, but it's just not cool Coca-Cola anymore. So what else have we got? I mean, we've got loads of ketchup, including Heinz. That still seems to be here. Full shelves. I mean, you can get whatever you want, really. Okay. So, like I said earlier, the food prices, they have gone up. They have risen. I mean, in fairness, not just in Russia, everywhere, really. But certainly, there's a lot of people in Russia who are living close or even below the poverty line. So for those people, every ruble counts, and these higher prices has made life a lot more difficult for them. There's no doubt about it. Really, if the sanctions are any good at all, I think they're only good for the first few months. They have an impact, but once the country rides that wave and finds ways of coping and gets around with it, then that's absolutely fine. In the case of Russia, they've just found new trading partners. You can still get your coffee from Colombia, your bananas from Ecuador, your beef from Argentina, or your wine from Chile. So really, the EU and Britain are kind of shooting themselves in the foot, because they have lost effectively the biggest market in Europe. Companies are banned from trading with them, and I think for small and medium-sized businesses, especially those in perhaps Central and Eastern Europe nearby that used to trade with Russia, I think they're really going to feel the hit. Let's not forget, all these decisions were taken completely undemocratically by the Western governments. None of them consulted the people, because if there was an honest and frank consultation about it before, then most people would have voted against it, because if they say, listen, if we do these sanctions against Russia, it's actually going to make your life actually more difficult, prices are going to rise and your life's not going to be as good, most people in Europe probably would have been, I'm not so good with that. I'm considering doing a future video on this specific type of architecture that they have in Yekaterinburg, so look out for that one, guys. One common complaint of people all around the world is that their country doesn't produce anything anymore. And that was the same in Russia as well. But since the sanctions, it's actually given Russia a kick up the backside, if you like, and they've actually started producing stuff. So again, in the short term, it might not have been great for Russia, but in the medium and long term, I think Russia could actually be a lot stronger as a result of the sanctions, especially economically.